everybody? Fernando Silva here with another video, and Apple just announced their brand new M1 iPad Air, or is it M1 iPad Air 5? I don't even know exactly what they're going to be calling it, but they released a new iPad Air with that M1 chip. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about everything new that Apple announced with this new iPad Air, what the price point's going to be, who it's for, and what that M1 chip in the iPad Air is going to mean for other iPads in the lineup and other Apple products moving forward. So without further ado, let's get right into it. So shout out to all the iPad lovers out there that just watched the Apple keynote and came over here to find out more about this iPad Air 5 or the M1 iPad Air. It even sounds weird saying it out loud. But let's start off with that big headlining feature, which is now all iPad Airs, all new iPad Airs will now have the M1 processor built right into it. Now Apple did this with the iPad Pros about a year and a half ago or a year ago at this point. I don't know exactly how long ago they've been out already. But they put the M1 chip in there and everybody thought it was going to be amazing. Everybody thought Final Cut Pro level applications from macOS will now be able to be used on the iPad Pro and iPadOS, and long story short, having the M1 chip inside of the iPad Pro has done me no real better than having an A15 or an A14Z or A12Z, whatever they had before the M1 chips. The iPad's still running smoothly, my day-to-day still is exactly the same. I still use LumaFusion, it still exports kind of at the same time. Affinity Photo is working on the A14 or the A12Z and also working on the M1 processor. So from a real tangible difference, it's going to be a little bit of an upgrade in terms of processing speeds in the background and stuff like that, but overall, your day-to-day is not really going to change with the included M1 processor in that iPad Air. It hasn't really, basically, we thought it was going to be an amazing thing to have the M1 processor in iPad Pros with iPadOS, and nothing really has come from it aside from maybe things getting a little bit faster, which at the end of the day, those iPads were already fast enough, so just that extra speed and efficiency is always welcome, but it's not as headlining, it's not as a big grab feature as we thought it was going to be. But Apple did claim that with that new M1 processor and the new GPUs in there, it's going to be 2x better when it comes to graphic performance and then 60% faster when it comes to CPU performance, which again is all welcome additions. And I do say that my iPad Pro is kind of like my gaming console of choice because it's so easy, it's compatible with Xbox and PlayStation controllers. PlayStation now has a Rumble Pack feature which came over for the PS5 controllers, so making it a little bit better and a little bit easier to work with. So overall, from a graphics performance, it's going to be really, really good. So if you guys want to use your iPad Air, your new M1 iPad Air, as your gaming console, you definitely can. But the thing is, the iPad Air 4 could already be your gaming console with Apple Arcade and Google Stadia and things like that. So again, the M1 processor is welcome, but it's not as game-changing as a feature as we think it's going to be. And that's coming from real experience using that M1 iPad Pro since it released. And before that, I was on the 2018 iPad Pro, which had that A12X chip, which again, even that iPad Pro to this day is still plenty fast. But now that we got the M1 processor out of the way, that is in the iPad Air 5 or the M1 iPad Air, we did get some tangible differences, and we better be getting tangible differences if it's going to be a full upgrade, right? So the first thing we did get was finally the upgrade to the 12 megapixel selfie camera. So now we do have that ultra wide camera on the selfie side, and it does support center stage, which is something that the iPad Pro first came out with. Then the iPad mini also got as well. So it's starting to fit into the lineup the way it should be, and I did mention that in my iPad Air 5 predictions video. So definitely take a look at that one if you guys want to see how right we are, and I think for the most part, we were 100% correct. So now it does fit into that iPad lineup, and we don't have that weird situation, especially with the M1 processor now in the iPad Airs, because before, the iPad Air 4 had an older chipset than the iPad mini at a cheaper price point, which made no sense. So now that we have the A15 on the iPad mini, and then M1s on the iPad Air and the iPad Pros, and then probably some sort of upgraded M1 processor in the new iPad Pros, probably in the fall, so the lineup is going to start to make a little bit more sense. But again, now it's making the iPad Pro seem like an overexpensive tablet where you're only really paying for that mini LED display on the larger one. But again, I'm digressing. Let's keep talking about this M1 iPad Air. So again, from a camera standpoint, we did get the selfie camera updated, and then also from a connectivity standpoint, they added 5G capability. It's still going to be a $200 upgrade when you do check out, but it is 5G capable now. And then on top of that, they did add some more capabilities to that USB-C port. So we did see that with the iPad Pros, when they released with the M1, we actually got Thunderbolt 4 ports on those iPad Pros. Now this is still a USB-C port, so it's not Thunderbolt. Don't go out and buy Thunderbolt cables and Thunderbolt only SSDs because this is not a Thunderbolt port. It is just a faster USB-C port, which they claim to have 2x faster transfer speeds, read and write speeds with hard drives and things like that. So a faster USB-C port, always welcome, but just realize that it's still a USB-C port and not a Thunderbolt port. And then that's pretty much all we got when it comes to a hardware standpoint, right? We got the M1 silicon in the new iPad Airs, we got new cameras on the iPad Airs, and then we got those new connectivity features, which is 5G and then a faster USB-C port. There was nothing really done to the screen, so it's still that same liquid retina display that we've been having since, I believe, the iPad Pro 2018, that 11-inch iPad Pro. So it's the same screen technology. There's no OLED, no mini LED, no 120 Hertz, no ProMotion. So again, that's what we're getting with the iPad Air. It's a very subtle upgrade, but again, that M1 being the headliner. But I'm going to reiterate and tell you guys that that M1 chip isn't all that it's touted, or at least Apple hasn't taken advantage of that M1 processor with iPadOS. Maybe you need it for a really well-functioning universal control, for it to talk to the M1 chips in Mac computers a little bit better, so maybe it'll help with that compatibility situation. But overall, you're not going to see too many upgrades coming from even a 3-year-old iPad Pro at this point compared to an M1 iPad Air. And just to make people aware, if you are a first-time iPad buyer, the iPad Air 5 is compatible with that $300 11-inch Magic Keyboard that can be used with the 11-inch iPad Pro. It'll also work with the iPad Air 5 or the M1 iPad Air. Also will work with the Slim Folio cases, and it's still Apple Pencil 2 compatible. So all the accessories that work with the iPad Pro lineup are also going to work with the iPad Air. So now we're in a situation where the iPad Air and the iPad Pro are so close together in terms of feature set that it's hard to recommend the iPad Pro lineup until Apple does something from either a hardware or a software standpoint to make those iPad Pros really stand out. And then one last thing that Apple did announce, or at least hint at or tease a little bit, was a new iMovie release for iPadOS. So iMovie is Apple's free video editing software that you can get on macOS, iPhone, so that you can get on macOS, iOS, iPadOS, anything that has an Apple logo, you can get iMovie. And iMovie has always been very bare and simple, very minimal, very easy to get started with. Like, I recommend people go to iMovie, learn it, and perfect it, because you can pretty much learn it in a day. But what Apple is showing is now a new feature in there to help you kind of create videos in a more formatted and templatized way, which I'm definitely going to play with. I'm going to see what that's like, see if I can kind of make my workflow a little bit more efficient when it comes to editing these videos through something like that with templatizing my videos, because there's usually a beginning, middle, and an end. So if I can templatize that and iMovie does something for my workflow, I'm definitely going to try it out. So I'll report back. Apple says in about a month it'll release to the entire public. And again, it's a free application made by Apple. But that's pretty much going to do it for this video, everybody. If you made it to the end, leave a little dolphin right here so I know that you made it to the end of this video, and leave some comments down below. Is the iPad Air 5 something that you want to get? Are you coming from an iPad Air 4? If you have a newer iPad, are you going to upgrade? Or maybe you're coming from a much older one, so the upgrade does make sense. Let me know in the comments below what your thoughts are. And I do believe they have another color. That blue color seems to have replaced the greenish color, but leave a comment down below because I'm not 100% sure. But it seems like the colors are a tiny bit different when it comes to like the hue of the colors that I saw during the Apple keynote. But let's see what Apple does. I'm very excited to check these out. So pre-orders are going to start on Friday, and it does start at that same price point of $599 for 64 gigs, and then I believe it's $749 for the 256 variant. So that's the one thing I did get wrong with my last video. I thought Apple would give us 128 gigs to start, but they're still keeping it at that 64 and 256 variant. So the only reason why you would go iPad Pro is if you need 500 or a terabyte worth of storage, which is something that, I kind of need. But that's going to do it for this video. Thanks so much for watching. Leave a comment down below like I mentioned. Check out channel sponsor Paperlike. So if you guys are getting a new iPad Air, make sure that your screen is protected, because it's the #1 way that you interact with your iPad. But again, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, leave a dolphin. I'm out of here. We'll pick one up and play with it and review it. So leave some comments down below of things you want me to try out or maybe compare to older iPad models and things like that. But until next time, peace.